So we're 6 months into President Trump's second term, and, a really fascinating and frankly challenging picture is emerging from the polls. It's a story of significant public disapproval. So today, we're going to dive right into what those numbers really mean, who's driving them, and what it could all be telling us about the 2026 midterms. Let's just start with the headline number, because it is a stark one: 60%. According to a recent Pew Research poll, that's how many Americans now disapprove of the president's job performance. No, that's a 9-point drop in his approval just since his second term began. But, one poll can be an outlier. To know if this is a real trend, we need to see if other polls are telling the same story. And it turns out they absolutely are. The data is remarkably consistent. You look at YouGov, you look at Gallup, they're all showing similar trends. In fact, YouGov is even reporting a new high for disapproval in his second term. But here's the crucial part. Look at the net approval. That's just the approved number minus the disapproved number, and it is deeply negative across the board, hitting as low as -22. So yeah, this isn't a fluke, it's a clear pattern. Okay, so what does a number like 60% really mean? I mean, it sounds high, but to understand its true impact, we've got to put it in some historical context. Believe me, these figures tell a much bigger story when we compare them to past presidencies. To really put this in perspective, think about this. The average post-World War II president has a 59% approval rating at this point in their term. That's that classic honeymoon period we always hear about. Trump's average? It's just 40%. In fact, that number is actually closer to Richard Nixon's ratings during the Watergate scandal than it is to a typical presidential honeymoon. It seems like the deep polarization in the country has just completely wiped out that traditional grace period. But here's where it gets even more interesting. It's not just the number of people who disapprove, it's the intensity behind it. This isn't just passive disagreement. A staggering 47% of Americans strongly disapprove of his performance. That is more than double the 23% who strongly approve. That tells you there's a highly motivated and very actively opposed segment of the population out there. Well, this leads us to our next big question, right? If support is eroding, where is that erosion actually coming from? Who exactly is driving this downward trend in the polls? So where's the decline coming from? You might think his most dedicated supporters are starting to have doubts, but that's not it at all. His core base is still incredibly loyal. No, the real slide in the polls is happening at the edges, among those key swing groups and less committed supporters who were absolutely crucial for his victory in 2024. Let's start with independents. I mean, they're arguably the most important group in any election. Support among this group has just fallen off a cliff. Gallup is reporting a 17-point drop just since the start of his term. And YouGov? Wow. Their data shows net approval has plummeted to a staggering -49. Alienating the political center like this is a huge, huge driver of that overall disapproval rating. And we see a really similar story with another key group, non-college educated men. These voters have been a cornerstone of Trump's coalition. At the beginning of his term, their net approval was a really healthy positive 17. And now, it's just +3. That is a massive shift within a demographic that was once a total bedrock of his support. And the trend just keeps going across other groups. We're seeing real erosion among Republicans who don't call themselves strong supporters. Approval among his own voters under 35 is down a whopping 23 points. And even among men overall, a recent 9-point drop has completely erased the gender advantage he had just a few months ago. Okay, so we've seen who is driving the disapproval. Now let's try to connect those numbers to the why. How are specific administration policies and actions actually shaping what the public thinks? Right away, you can see the administration's big economic policies are facing some major headwinds. There's a clear majority, 61%, disapproving of his tariff policies. Even his major tax and spending package is underwater. And what's really crucial is that this all adds up to a majority now disapproving of his handling of the economy overall. And that was a key strength for him during his first term. And if you look closer at that one big, beautiful bill, you can really see the challenge they're facing. Only about a third of the country actually approves of it, while 46% disapprove. And that big slice of unsure voters, that tells you they really failed to sell a cornerstone piece of their legislation to the American public. But there is one issue that goes way beyond economic policy, one that has united Americans in disapproval like very few others: the administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. A full 70% of the public disapproves. And that's because, as the source material puts it, this has become a rare point of broad bipartisan discontent. This isn't your typical left versus right issue. It has created serious friction inside the Republican Party, especially with younger conservatives, and it directly challenges that whole draining the swamp narrative. And look, this disapproval is being fueled by a whole range of other actions, from controversial orders on education and immigration to rolling back environmental protections and the constant fighting with the press. They all feed into this bigger narrative of public discontent. So these numbers don't just exist in a vacuum, right? They have real-world political consequences. So let's broaden our focus a bit and talk about what all this could mean for the 2026 midterm elections. Now, to understand the risk for the GOP here, you really need to get this one concept: negative voting. It's the idea that voters are often more motivated by what they're against than what they're for. Remember that intense 47% strong disapproval we saw earlier? Well, that is the perfect fuel for negative voting, a phenomenon that is known to drive super high turnout for the opposition party. And it looks like the administration sees this threat very clearly, and its response has been, well, pretty extraordinary. A proactive campaign of partisan gerrymandering right in the middle of the decade. States like Texas, Indiana, and Missouri are redrawing their congressional maps now, trying to create more safely Republican seats. It's a sign they might not be confident about winning on public opinion alone, and instead, they're trying to reshape the entire battlefield itself. So ultimately, the story the data tells us is one of serious erosion among key groups, and it's being driven by unpopular policies. And that leaves us with the big question, right? Are we just watching a temporary dip in the polls, or is this the beginning of a powerful wave, one that could totally reshape the 2026 midterms? As always, the numbers are going to tell the story. Thanks for joining us.